Welcome to Spiral We Radio, where Dr. Barry Gelston and Dr. Karen Arnstein dive into the real stories, ideas, and breakthroughs that help us better understand and support every kind of learner. Barry and Karen have been working side by side for more than 8 years, researching how to create learning environments that truly work for neurodiverse people. Together, they've explored how giftedness, twice exceptionality, and unique learning profiles can be embraced as strengths, and how connection and adaptation change the game for students, families, and educators. In this episode, they sit down with Bryan Mishler, a licensed clinical social worker and doctoral candidate at Bridges Graduate School, who leads transformative work at the Treffert Studio in Wisconsin. Bryan specializes in helping autistic and twice exceptional learners discover their strengths, build resilience, and create meaningful paths toward independence, whether that's through music, visual arts, stop-motion animation, or other passions. Barry and Karen dive into how Bryan's strength-based adaptive approach mirrors Spiral We's pillars, and why centering talent and connection changes everything. Here now are your hosts, Dr. Barry Gelston and Dr. Karen Arnstein.
So hi, everybody. I'm Barry Gelston, Spiral We Radio, and Karen Arnstein. Have the pleasure of interviewing the one and only Bryan Mishler. He's a licensed social worker who works at the Treffert Center, and he's also a doctoral candidate at Bridges Graduate School, and he does incredibly great work. He can tell you more about it. So let's just start, Bryan. Take a moment, introduce yourself, and tell us about who you are.
Yeah, my name is Bryan Mishler. Like you said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist at Treffert Studios, which is under the Treffert Center umbrella of services. Our specialty is people on the autistic spectrum, and we serve all people within the 2E community and neurodiversity. Although autism is kind of our specialty, we go across the board. The vast majority of my personal clients are probably 75% autistic, and then the rest is ADHD and dyslexia. So that it's kind of that specialty, and we focus on the unique abilities within the context of those, for lack of a better word, neurotypes. So autistic neurotype, ADHD neurotype. And within the diagnosis, we know that there are great quality skills and talents that happen within there. So when they come to us, we really try to focus on the gifts and benefits that come along with those typical neurotypes.
I want to stop you for a second because you used a couple of terms that people may not know. You and I know.
Sure. Yeah.
So when you talk about neurotypes, neurodiversity, what do you mean by all that?
2E, like often through here, we talk about the word savants. And if you look at kind of the operational definition of savants, and then you look at the operational definition of 2E, they're identical. So I look at this and go, this is two different fields studying the same population, and they came up with the exact same operational definition. The definition that we kind of use is that there is some level of very high performance that is in stark contrast to a neurological disability like autism, ADHD, dyslexia. An area we also really focus on is we call it acquired savants. So somebody who is in an accident and comes out of that accident with some sort of unique ability that they didn't have previously. For instance, we've met people who have been struck by lightning or in a car accident, and they come out as like concert pianists, or they speak a language they've never had access to before. So that's kind of like where our niche is within the international research aspect of that, is that we look at these things and try to figure out neurologically how are these things possible. That's kind of from the research side of things. Now for treatment and talent development, that's really our area that I enjoy is the most fun. Try to find that talent that a child or young adult has and see how we can take that talent and use that to leverage vocational opportunities, learning opportunities, and those things within the context of what it is that they are passionate about. So 2E then is typically used in the educational world. It's twice exceptional. They have some sort of uniquely high talent that is in contrast to some of the either developmental or cognitive issues they might have.
So let's come back to the Trefford Center and the Trefford Studio. What are those? Can you explain
We
what
are,
they
we
are and the
are
difference?
we're a mental health clinic, first and foremost, and we provide the psychotherapy, assessment, med management, speech and OT. We are actually part of SSM Health, which is the largest nonprofit organization for mental health in the Midwest. So we're connected with a hospital, and then we've kind of branched off into the world of education. So we have a K through 8 school. We have a 3, 4, and 5K kindergarten class at the Trevor Center through the public school system here. And then we use these strength-based strategies to teach whatever the kids are good at, right? We try to start developing those talents as early as we recognize them.
What is Trevor Studios?
So we started with Trevor Center that kind of focused on younger kids. Then we kind of had the K through 8, and we had a high school, charter high school, that recently, unfortunately, lost its funding through a referendum vote. Then the studios was brought on as kind of like, what's that transition look like from high school to either vocational and college? Or sometimes we have to look at things and go, is there another route here that doesn't include the educational system where they can use their gifts and talents? For instance, musicians. If we run across an individual who can listen to Mozart one time and be able to play it, that person doesn't really need to go to school to learn how to do their instrument, right? What they need is, how do I monetize what I can do and move into performances? So often we'll try to come up with ideas for those families, like start by playing for kids in school or for old folks homes, or how do we set up this person for success through opportunities in which they can just show the world their amazing talents. The studio is kind of a place to bring all that together. Let's say we have a person who comes in that has autism, but maybe hasn't found their niche thing yet. We wanted to pack the studio with as many art supplies, music stuff, theater. We have a professional grade recording equipment, professional grade audio video editing suites. An art studio. We have a theater space that can double both as a theater, and we can record a whole band. SSM Health was amazing because they came along, they got us the buildings, they renovated the whole thing. It looks amazing, and then they gave us the finances to be able to purchase as much stuff in as many different areas as we could think of. So if somebody came in and was like, "I have an interest, but I don't really know what I want to do," then we have like dozens of instruments that we can bring out and they can mess with and they can explore at their own pace if they're interested in. Let's say we have a couple of kids that came along recently that are interested in stop motion. So they've been using like little characters. They use he's like 14, and the videos he puts out are incredible. We were like, what, how did you learn how to do this? Where'd you get this from? But we can take what he was doing, which was just stop motion with no audio, and we paired him with another kid that's interested in audio video editing, also on the autism spectrum. And so that kid adds the sound effects to he loves WWE, so he uses the action figures to do his stop motion. And then they added green screen the background so we can put an arena audience in the background. They can do the crashing through the tables and all those things. So we tried to find these fun activities where they can coordinate together, because when that kid becomes 18 and he's already got 10,000 hours doing this, he can move into doing these things live instead of looking at the typical progress that would need to happen through the educational system. Because you don't necessarily have to have a degree to do these kinds of jobs, but you have to have a portfolio to show what work I've done and how well I can do it.
So when we talk about savants and twice exceptional, what are your expectations for launching? Do they become fully launched adults, or are they dependent? What happens when they acquire these skills?
So that ranges a whole spectrum, right? So, like for instance, I know a blind autistic gentleman who plays the piano. He's never really going to be independent, but his entire family now lives off of the talents that he has, and the whole family almost like created a business around his unique skills and abilities. So they travel the country in an RV. they do these concerts. Then in those cases, what we try to do is either provide additional experiences or, try to give a platform for them to be able to show off their talents. So that ranges. We certainly have individuals who end up being completely independent in all areas, and then that level of support can happen at any level where their needs are. So we have some people that still live at home but have jobs. We have some people who use their talents as sort of a decompression area and they might have jobs in other fields. We have individuals who need full support, but they can still participate within their high skill area within different projects. So it's not like you participate in this and now you have no supports. It's really about how can we take where the person needs the supports, but also provide this additional stuff that increases the overall total quality of life. And really, that's where we see a lot of people who are neurodiverse that struggle with depression and anxiety. And I've seen studies recently that say, especially with kids and neurodiverse people, the more you talk about their anxiety and depression, the more anxious and depressed they get, which totally makes sense, right? But that's the typical within psychotherapy. That's typically what you do. You provide psychoeducation on anxiety and depression, but these kids don't care. It's like, well, this Harvard teacher said that you should do X, Y, and Z. They don't care that a Harvard teacher says those things. So you have to still connect with them with where they're at and do those things to support their passions. And that's how you kind of get there. And the more they feel connected to a community, the more you see their self-esteem rise and their resilience rise. And those are really the protective factors against anxiety and depression. You don't need to focus on anxiety and depression to cure it. You need to focus on self-esteem, resilience, and confidence to cure anxiety and depression. So that's kind of the angle that we take is how can we, because when you feel like you're connected, you don't have confidence in a vacuum, right? It's a reflection of the community and how they feel about the skills and talents that I have. That really is the benefit to moving forward.
I want to go back a little bit. You talked about the two students that you had who had complementary skill sets. I'm assuming they're both autistic. So one of the raps on autistic people is that they lack social skills. But here's the big question. How are they working with each other and partnering with each other? Did they have their mutually adaptive way to communicate with each other?
It, that's a great question because I feel like often they communicate best through their passions, right? If we're focusing on verbal communication, there might be some struggles there. And that I feel like is really my role within these contexts because I don't know anything that I would know I'd go to this kid for. So there is a flip there in the sense that I'm like, this is amazing. Show me what you're doing. And I'm like, hey, I know somebody else who does this that would add to your project. Well, they're so excited then to meet that other person that can provide that additional thing that there's an excitement to meet the other person. So right away within the context of the things that they love, they get into that. Now, is there a lot of social back and forth of what we're going to do after this project? No, they socialize within the context of the project that they're working on.
So the project was the relationship.
Hmm. The project. And I see that with a lot of these kids. It's like they're like they can communicate within the world within if we look at behavior as communication rather than verbal communication, they speak within the context of their passions, right? They might not be able to express themselves great, but for the kid that's animated, he can express everything that he needs to through his animation. For our music people, they might not be able to carry on a conversation about every topic that we would expect to be typical or that we would have small talk, for instance. That doesn't happen very often within the context, I feel. But within the context of them performing their music, like that is where they connect with the community and that the language around their music is usually pretty good or whatever their passion is.
I want to stay on this because this is fascinating to me because of the misperception about people on the spectrum. And my thought or question is, how different is it? Here they are, they're basically playing two different instruments, right? One video, one music. And do they, is it like being two musicians getting in a groove with each other?
Yes. Yes. So we just had a get together where we had a pianist from Nigeria come, and we have a young lady here who is an amazing singer. Now, typically, well, Barry, I know you have some musical experience. I have a very hobbyist level of music experience, but when you sit down with a new musician, there is usually a lengthy time of like, how does your style fit in with my style, and how can we create something that's coordinates. I was amazed at how fast, like he played through a couple, 2, 3 times the song that he wanted to play, and the girl, sang it. He was able to actually, while she was singing, adapt how he was playing to match her singing style within the first context of them doing it. And then they got on the stage maybe, 25 minutes later and performed that in front of 300 people flawlessly. So, and they were both overjoyed. I think we look a little bit at socialization as like they needed to have this great conversation in order to have a wonderful shared experience. So
Right.
they had this wonderful shared experience, but they didn't need that communication back and forth to feel connected because they felt connected through their passion and their music.
One of the things you're sharing with us, when we use the term spiral adaptive lens and we look at asynchronous development and understanding people within their asynchrony. So, spiral adaptive lens means that you look at somebody and you don't expect the norm, but understand that what they do is quote unquote normal for them or typical for them. And that's where you start your expectations and your judgment. And so you don't have the expectation that they're going to chit chat. They're going to ask about their cousins, sisters, friends who are playing in the playground and listening to a particular song. Their mutual interest, and you're looking at them and you're thinking about their strengths and how you see these people communicating through their strengths, and they fully understand each other. They understand each other's output, and they respond and they adapt to each other's output. So they're in this mutually adaptive relationship, which really sounds like communication to me, as good as anything. Am I missing something?
No, you're absolutely correct. Your description is right on. And then within the context of that, like this develops slowly over time, right? They'll stay within the context of the activity that they're working on or their passion project. But over time, you'd be surprised. All of a sudden, they're like, one person will say something about like Dungeons and Dragons or a video game they play. And then somebody else in that group will be like, hey, I play Dungeons and Dragons too. And then all of a sudden it does switch from the project based stuff. All of a sudden they're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. And now with it, I have to remind myself constantly because most of these groups are set up to kind of be social groups. But when it's project based, you're like, come on, we got to do the project. I have to take myself out of it. Like we got to be on time and on schedule. And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, they're talking about unrelated things. And then I have to remind myself, like, this is the miracle that's happening here, not the project ends up being so awesome that I think I get tied to like, they need to show their things. And then I'm like, wait a minute, they're having typical conversations with each other. And I have to remind myself the project is not the most important part here. It's the engagement with each other. So I have to tell myself and to remind other people that sometimes we get stuck on the plan
Right.
or the curriculum to move forward, and you forget that the point of the curriculum is the thing that's happening right in front of you. You have to now stop with your plan and your curriculum and let that kind of flow naturally. That just happened with my creative media group this past week. We were trying to set up the next project and they started talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and I had to, well, I remembered to take a step back. I'm like, they're socializing. They socialized the whole time that we were supposed to be doing the project. And then funny enough, they, at the end of the time, they're like, well, all we did was talk the whole time and we never moved on to the project stuff. Although they looked at me and they said, you need to be a bit more organized. I'm like, what do you mean I need to be more organized? This is exactly what we're hoping will happen.
Right.
So, there is that. But there also is sometimes times where the socialization, it's not really socialization. It'll be like one person points out a thing that's loosely connected to the thing we were talking about. And then what often happens is then a next person will step in and also talk about something that it's like they're like, oh, now's the time to talk. And they just bring out any topic, and so they're not really connected, and that's when I have to go, okay, let's regroup and get back to the thing that's happening.
So
But
it becomes like parallel play.
yeah,
Kind of like they all just start reciting their favorite topic,
yeah,
whether someone else is interested in it.
it's interesting that you bring up parallel play, because I was going to add to that story. We had two individuals that were sitting next to each other and they were talking, and they were two people that rarely communicate with other people. And I was like, well, what's going on over here? And I went and sat down over by them to kind of like get engaged in the conversation. And they were not having the same conversation. The one kid was talking about whatever they loved, and the other kid was talking about whatever they loved. And when I came and sat down and I let it happen for a little bit before I figured out, I'm like, oh, they're not even talking. They'd like follow the rules of communication of like, I say a thing and then I stop. Now you say a thing and then you stop. And then I say a thing and then you stop. But totally different conversations. What the one person said did not have any connection to what the other person said. I'm like, you guys aren't even talking about the same thing. Both of them almost said at the same time. I'm just happy somebody will sit here and listen to what I have to say. And now, isn't that like the source of like, they were providing that social context for each other, even though the words they were using were not like anybody else that would said in that conversation would be like, what is going on here? I can't even follow what's happening here. But for those two, that was the perfect social situation for them to be able to sit there and talk, and they're buddies now. So when we try to view like how our relationships are with other people, and we try to impose that, like how that should look on other people, I think we need to take a step back and go, maybe socializing for this particular group of people doesn't look like what we think it is, and that it has the same impact and qualities that we look for in a conversation. But now let's say if we interrupted that and we go, well, when you're in a conversation, you should say this, and the other person should say something connected to this. You need to then expand on what that person says. What if that doesn't really need to happen within the context of neurodiversity? That it is more than just verbal language. It's a shared experience. Like I said, it's kind of like behavior is language for them. And they're able to share that through their passion. Often it's referred to as info dumping, right? They were both info dumping on each other, but they were using all the context and the rules of language, but they weren't meshing the back and forth aspect of the language, but they did take all the other aspects, tone, turn taking, the rhythm of a conversation. All of those things were still there. It was just separate topics. And for them, it was connected and made sense. I say this often because I get a lot of credit that I don't deserve, because somebody will come in and see that blind autistic gentleman play Mozart and go, how did you teach him Mozart? I I didn't teach him Mozart. Or how did you get this artist to be able to create this amazing piece of art? Didn't have anything to do with me. All I do is try to set up the opportunity for them to do their thing. And then more often than it's an amazing engagement and interaction, that all that needed to happen was the opportunity.
Wow. I love this, Brian. So a few things that I take away from what you're saying is that you look at them and you question the status quo of understanding the kids. You don't look at them and say they're not like everybody else and then just throw up your hands and treat them that they're doing everything wrong. You decide to look at them in this other way that's very positive and very affirming. And I want to say that you do this too using sometimes medical language that people in the strength-based world don't like to use, but you still will use some diagnostic language to say, hey, this kid is is autistic or has ADHD, but, and that doesn't take away from the fact that they have all of these other strengths. And I want them to know that the conversations I have with them are positive and affirming. And that's some pretty powerful adaptation. Can you talk about some more examples about that, about some other students where they present asynchronously and whether they're relating to somebody else or they're working on something, or if they're in a group setting and what they're doing just does not jibe with normal, quote unquote, normal activities, how do you assess, redirect, support, and problem solve?
So, like you said, we within the context of this, because you're working with insurance companies and you're working with medical field stuff, there has to be kind of a shared relationship. Now, personally, I would love if everybody jumped on board, the neurodiverse understanding of things, but the reality is that that's not the case. So we have to use language sometimes that insurance companies will understand, or they're providing doctor that has no background in 2E to help it with this. I prefer to use like the idea of neurotypes. Now, neurotypes is still a valuable way of looking at things because I know that within the context of those populations, there are going to be certain things that kind of fall within the context of those populations. ADHD is another example of they share similar characteristics. Now, you can't go into that and view those as like hard edges, right? Because of that asynchronicity, and not every person has to hit the same things to get a diagnosis. But a diagnosis is needed for treatment, right? Insurance company is going to pay for something unless a diagnosis is provided. And unfortunately now, in most places, you're looking at the deficits, right? Here we would look at, okay, we got the diagnosis for them to receive services. Now let's start looking at all the positive things that come within these. And for our kids, that's transformational because nobody has even told them that there are benefits that people who are autistic neurotypes, ADHD neurotypes, and dyslexic neurotypes can do other things that other people can't do at the same level that they do it. So and sometimes for these kids who think they're good at nothing, to just highlight like what those specialties within a diagnosis means, that's helpful right off the bat because they're like, nobody's ever even told me that there's a benefit to having this. So that's one way. They come in and I go, what do you love to do? And that's where, that relationship really starts. That's how I develop a relationship with the kids. If you come over to my house and all we do is everything I want to do, we're not going to have a great relationship. And probably you won't want to come back. So my entire focus is on like, what do you want to do? If I have a kid that comes in for a session, even if I've seen that kids for a long time, I'm like, what do you feel like doing today? And they let me know. And then I try to gear everything through that lens. We call it an open window. So he
Nice.
gives me an open window. How can I put all of our goals and all my expectations through the window that they open for me?
You work in different contexts. Before you go on, could you explain the different contexts that you work in? So, as a therapist in the classroom, at the studio.
So I primarily work as a therapist at the studio. So everything that I do is through mental health. We do have a school, but I don't work in the school with that's a typical teachers and stuff. So they take what we call the Trevor approach, which is a 6 pillar loose construction of ideas. Because we don't want, sometimes when you list things and everybody follows the list and it has to go through things, we go, here's an in general idea of how we need to support these things. Now you have to put the child in the center of this and mold it around the child. So we don't want to have any hard things where it's like, this is what you have to do with a particular kid. Well, we're like, here's a ton of ideas. And now we take this kid. And so the first one is accurate assessment. The second pillar is relationship focus. The third is strength based strategies, sensory awareness, enriching environments, and let's see if I can. Also, the last one is system change. So we look at those 6 things and go, how can we apply it to now this kid? And that gives us a lot of flexibility within those things. So I don't have a curriculum I need to follow through mental health. I don't have to do any of those things. So I can focus solely on whatever it is that the kid does well. So sometimes a kid does well, let's say you're in history and you're like, okay, he's an artist. But I have this history curriculum that I need to follow. And I can use some strength based things to get that kid to use art to describe some historical relevant thing that I want to do. So that's a way of using 2E within the educational system, but I don't have to do that because I'm not stuck to a curriculum. I can do whatever I want within the child's passion area. So I can say, you're an artist. What theme do you enjoy doing? Let's focus entirely around your interest. So there's not really an outside force essentially telling me I have to meet these particular criteria within the context of an educational system.
So
So
you're
I
kind
think go ahead.
of like a homeschool parent in a
Kind of,
lot of ways.
very much. And I think what we do here at the studio too is to provide those outside of school enrichment activities that they might not have the opportunity for because their gift does not happen within the framework of an educational system. For instance, our blind autistic piano player, he's not really going to be able to do anything in text. So, how do we get around those kinds of things? Well, you have to focus purely on music and develop his process and look at performance. And that's where, and we didn't invent this, it's very similar in all 2E, but portfolio development. How can we show that you have really high level abilities in these areas through completed activities that you've participated in? Well, creating the opportunity where they can complete a portfolio activity so that they can carry that forward on a resume.
So do you do things like with adaptive technology?
Yeah, if a person needs that kind of stuff, absolutely. Um, that could be like using Grammarly or a voice to text or AI. AI has come a long way, and we definitely use that. Let's say you have an animator who maybe I can't find a person that can do a script, but that person needs a script to be able to animate the thing that they want to do. So we'll use AI to flesh out a simple script, and then they have something that they can use to do the animation. Now, in the perfect world, we would always find the complementary person to do the thing that we would need to be done, but the reality is that that's not always the case. So how do you adapt it? There's a lot of within our context, although I think at first it's a big move because you're not focusing necessarily on a curriculum, and it takes a level of creativity to go, how do I take this thing that this kid is doing? It's easy with music and art, but like that kid that's doing stop motion, that's not any class he's taking in school. So now how do we expand on that?
Do you get involved in, type 2 education with them? So if they're interested in stop motion or something around that, do you help them find courses on how to do that? Do you get the materials? How does that work?
So we have courses. We have some mentors here that are neurodiverse that actually work with us. So we have audio video editors. We have music kids. I always call them kids, but they're young adults. Video editors that are on the autistic spectrum that work for the studio. So that kid that comes in with stop motion that might have questions, he gets to work with an adult with autism that has that specific interest also. So it's not just getting the information that that person has, but they get to work with a person who has the same disorder as them or, neurotype for a diagnosis. And they get to see in real time, here's somebody like me that's successful within the context of the thing that we're trying to teach. We also have a lot of people that come through us internationally that have certain skills. So we can also show these kids those people and kind of do the same thing. You're not alone. There are people who have a neurotype like you that have been hugely successful. And I think that that goes a long way from switching this idea of I'll probably never be able to do anything to real life examples of people that they get to see in their own life doing those things. And then if we don't know, then there's the community college next door that we partner with. We hope we can find somebody from there. Or I've reached out to Bridges people from, school. It's like Erin T. I've reached out to her recently because of her experience with media production and working with 2E people. That's probably a bigger part of my job because I don't know how to do any of these things. And the kids are at a level that's so far beyond me, I'll never catch up. So I have to find somebody else that already knows something about the thing they're doing. Sometimes the case is I don't even know how awesome. I'm like, this is phenomenal. But I'm not in that field. So how do I know what the level of this person really is? Because he's had, and most of these kids, when they come in with this, they've had no formal education in the thing. They just figured it out on their own. So when a kid can figure that out at such a high level, like what can I add to that except for becoming that cheerleader of like, this is phenomenal. Let's find a platform for you to be able to do this more. And then that is then from the psychotherapy perspective, that's how we come back around to they're so excited that somebody's finally interested in the thing that everybody was told them that they were that was useless or hey, that's cool, but what are you going to do with that? I'm like, this is amazing. This is something you could do for the rest of your life and make a career of. They're like, okay, Bryan gets it. But this idea of Bryan gets it, he might swing and miss. If I present something that I'm like, okay, it looks like you're really good at this, can you do this too? And then if they can't do that, I have to take a step back and go, okay, I'm looking at these two things and thinking that they're very similar, but there's something within the context of this thing they're doing that is not the thing that I thought it was. So I have to reevaluate what is it about this thing that is what the key that they're focusing in on. And I have to expand it from that piece, not what I thought would have been the natural connection. So it's a lot of trial and error. You're like, well, how about this? How about this? I might take two people that seem like they would go together really easily, but there's something missing. Sometimes that means adding a third person that bridges the two things. And then the activity or the relationship can happen. Sometimes it's finding a mentor. Sometimes it's backing off of that project and finding a different project that syncs more in with the interests of the kids. Maybe they're not ready to jump completely from what they've been doing to like meeting the needs of an external client, right? So if you're an artist, but you have an external client that says, I want a landscape of, a sunset over a lake. And the kid who's incredible at art goes, well, I'm only drawing robots. And so you give me the money for this piece of art and I'll draw you a robot. Well, if they go, well, I don't want a robot.
Right.
So then we work with them to be like, okay, you love, and I've used this phrase a lot. You might not like the topic matter, but you love the work. So how do we switch from you using your talents in this area and incorporate it on top of this other thing? And sometimes they're not ready. Sometimes we need to find a bridge that moves them from the thing that they really love doing to being able to perform the same task and ability outside of their topic area. Does that make sense?
It's incredible is what it is. So what I get from this is that there's so many different topics or skills, tools that you use that come together in one incredible flow. And I made some notes here. One is you treat yourself as a process manager. You do not take the role as the sage on the stage. You don't have any preconceived notions on how they're supposed to act, what you're supposed to do, the proper way to do things. And in doing so, you really do a good job of helping your learners develop good, strong self-identity. And because you're working with their strengths and you see them through the lens of their strengths, they then get a chance to see themselves through the lens of those strengths. Another thing that I get from what you're talking about is the constant use of iteration, adaptive connection through iteration. And you're always in the process of being curious, investigating what you can do, and then trying it out. And then what's the result of it? And if it doesn't work, you wipe the slate clean and you start over again. And um, there's this really undercuts this notion that there's a way to do it. there is a solution, but the real solution isn't doing the thing, it's engaging in the process. And I found that really powerful. And the last thing, which I started with, is the ability to mutually adapt, and that there's this constant environment and context of mutual adaptation that you're engaging in between yourself and the learner and their environment. Like, I love that story you just told about the kid, wanting a picture of one thing, but all they want to do is make pictures of robots. And how do you get them to then develop their skill, support them to develop their skill, their self-identity, that I'm somebody who can adapt and work with someone else and see that as a positive skill. That's pretty powerful stuff, Bryan.
I would say, we talk about the learner. I feel like more often they teach me the thing that they're doing. So I never come into these because I don't have any skills in this area. So what I usually do is recognize something and be like, how are you doing this? Like, this is amazing. You're doing this at such a high level. Show me what you're doing to be able to have this outcome. Don't they say the number one way to learn something about a particular topic is to teach it to somebody else, right? That creates a total shift in the social dynamic. They're in charge of trying to make sure I understand what it is that they're doing. And even sometimes then I don't know. I have to go to somebody else who I see who has a similar thing and go, hey, look at what they're doing. What do you think could be the magic piece to help them move forward in that talent development? And now from a social perspective, if they're describing something to me and I'm not understanding, they have to change how they are communicating that so that I can understand. Same thing we do as teachers to students, right? We have to, they're not getting it, so I'm going to have to explain it in a different way. Now that it's theory of mind, right? So they have to go, okay, Bryan's not getting it. But some of the most enjoyable circumstances is when I finally understand and can express back to them. I see the same thing when I'm sure, Barry, I know your background in math, when you're explaining something to a kid who just does not get it. And then you provide the lens in which they have that aha moment. And like the excitement that the teacher gets, like,
Right.
got it. They understand it. Like they have that level. They're like, Bryan finally gets it. He knows how to do the thing that we get. Like, they're so excited that I understood what they're trying to do, and I can show them that I get it. That dynamic changes a lot. Like, then the next time that I come to the studio, there was a kid here today who does the stop motion stuff. As soon as I walk in the door, he's like, hey, Bryan, I built a new set for my thing and I'm doing this now. He's initiating that on his own because of the excitement that he had from teaching me the thing. Now he's initiating the conversation. He's initiating the next steps in his projects. He's initiating the stuff when he goes home, and he continues to work on the stuff that we did in the studio. Like, I'm getting 1,000 reps out of that kid when he leaves the therapy session to do his thing, and I don't have to do anything now. Like, he pushes the project forward. I only get involved when there's a stop point of like, how do I move forward? And sometimes, like I said, that's finding somebody else to work with, connecting two people, giving out some basic ideas, and then seeing his project expand and the excitement he has. Because now he's like, what's next? What's next? And
Bryan,
that level of excitement provides all the motivation, because that's really what it comes down to, right? What is your intrinsic motivation to continue moving forward? Now, I don't have to be, sometimes if you don't have it, it's like you have to be Mickey Mouse or Disneyland at a level to get a child to participate. Now, I don't have to be the motivational speaker. I end up being like the cheerleader who's just like, what you're doing is already awesome. Show me what you're going to do next. That style becomes so much more fluid. And I think that kid thinks about, like, what am I going to show Bryan the next time I see him?
Karen, do you want to ask Bryan some questions?
Sure. Bryan, hi. So I absolutely love that you approach your students with curiosity. I will tell you, I was actually speaking to a parent yesterday who was looking they're really struggling to find the right fit for their 8-year-old, twice exceptional child. And explaining to her kind of how I approach teaching as well, and approaching them that we're in this together, that we're both going to be learning from each other because there's this symbiotic dyad, right? She was so, I guess, shocked in a way that parents, it's such a novel approach to use curiosity when you're working with students. A lot of people think, I go back and I think about my teaching program when I was getting credentialed, and that they teach you it's one way. As the educator, as the adult in the room, my job was to deliver curriculum, not about finding out my students' interests. I love how you described this story with the stop motion with this one student too, because one of the things that teachers find so difficult is how do I motivate my students to get involved? How do I motivate them? How do I do more than just provide rewards, which is the extrinsic motivation? It has to come from within, because then it's meaningful. And so it's just that shift in our perspective sometimes, that it's all it takes. And you're right. You don't have to be like on stage like you're at Disneyland. I totally agree with you. But a lot of times teachers do think that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When we talk about it from a learning, that it's not like there's one of us that's the teacher and another one that's the learner.
Yes.
It's a learning partnership where we're both going to learn about what it is that this process. Now, that probably works a
I
little
love how
bit
you
better
said
for
that.
me, that because I don't have any knowledge of the things that they're doing. So I can come into it with a legitimate naivete, I guess. Like, I really don't know. And then we're a team. So when there's a success and I'm like, high fives, we did it. Or even like, you did it. All I provided was kind of the cheerleader aspect of the side of things, and then I learned the little pieces. But when they finish a project, they're so excited and so happy, and almost they're that happiness lasts like maybe 30 seconds, and then they say to me, "What's next?" And then my response to that is, "I don't know. What do you think? What should we do next?"
That's
And
like
so
every
I
teacher's,
and time I need to step in is when they get stuck, and I might have to go, well, have we looked in this direction? Have we looked in this direction? Do you feel like we need to find somebody else? Let's go talk to so and so and see if they have ideas. And then that allows me to bridge with them that social piece for projects like that. Well, I'm stuck. Now what do I do? And they come to me and I go, I also have no idea what to do. But here's what I do know. We can ask somebody else. And even if they don't have the answer, they might have the next piece to the puzzle. Well, I don't know, but I know so and so knows. I'm like, so we can chase this little path to find out what we need to be able for you to move forward. And they get to see it from my perspective. They're like, well, I don't know what to do, so I don't know. And I can go, yeah, me too. But here's what we can do. We can go find somebody who does know.
love how you are so authentic with your students, but also you're very human. And it's okay to convey that. Just because they're kids and we're adults doesn't mean that we know all the answers. And the honesty, I think you've gained a lot of respect from your students because you're honest with them.
I think that's absolutely true. It's a key factor in developing a relationship, right? Um, it's a shared experience. Anytime somebody comes into a relationship with a power dynamic that doesn't necessarily suit the person who appears in the lore part of that, right? So it might start like this for the first 15 minutes, but shortly thereafter, they're above me.
Right.
And then it's a much easier engagement where they get to steer their own ship and find their path through their interests. It's really and I feel like I don't have any of these moments before. Like 100 years ago when we were working in a deficit based model, I was dealing with aggression and violence and shutdown. I haven't seen uh, an aggressive act since adopting a strength-based model. Sometimes we do have to shift from, again, project focus to maybe emotional support on a certain day. They're not in the right frame of mind to do this, so let's do something else. And making that totally fine. We don't have to do it today. We can focus on, we can also teach, like, how do I regulate using co-regulation? That's okay. If this isn't what we're doing today, what should we do? What do you want? What are you interested in? Sometimes then that's like, let's just play a video game. Um, and then I feel like what happens there is that they go, Bryan recognizes when I'm struggling and he'll
Yeah.
stop the activity instead of, a lot of times there's like, well, how much can you get out of them before they have a complete meltdown? And it's like, how about if we just not do it? And then we focus on regulation. And then they go, okay, Bryan gets me. When he recognizes it's too hard for me, he'll stop it. And then on those certain days when we have to get something done, I feel like they go, well, Bryan hasn't stopped this yet, so I must be able to do a little bit more.
What trust that you have built with your students is incredible. They trust you. But not just that, who doesn't love and want to be seen
Absolutely.
and understood?
And that gives them a certain sense of control, right?
Yeah.
And maybe in a environment where people aren't necessarily, well, like I talked earlier, if you're focused on a curriculum and you have to get so many chapters done within the context of a semester, or there's going to be um, a standardized test that they're going to have to take, and we have to cover this material because they're going to have to know it. The focus is not always on, are they in the right frame of mind to do the thing that I'm asking them to do. And sometimes, the answer when you're stuck in those confined environments is, it doesn't matter what they are capable of or not capable of doing. We have to move forward. And I'm very thankful that I don't have to have those kinds of restrictions on my professional career, that I can really just focus on whatever it is that the kid wants.
It's so well said. Thank you. So I have a question, Bryan. If you had any advice for teachers and parents, what advice would you give to teachers and parents to potentially find mentors?
Well, it often starts with the connections that I have within the context of what I'm doing. So if you're looking for a mentor, there's some topical information that you need that needs to be transitioned to the person who needs the information. So then I need to find a person who does that. Sometimes there's somebody within the context of the work here that knows something about it. But if that doesn't happen, then I'm asking my supervisors, hey, does anybody know anybody who knows somebody who knows astrophysics? And then it's chase down leads. And we're lucky to have like the school here, so then I can skip over. And then because we're a part of a large healthcare organization that is active in the community, often I'll go to the directors of our programs and be like, I'm looking for somebody who knows something in this area. Even within the context of our healthcare organization, like, we have people who do video editing, but we have people who make YouTube videos. And I often say, because parents will be like, well, he wants to be a YouTuber. And I'm like, we have a whole department that focuses on little videos, and I don't think anybody in that department is over 27, and they probably all make twice as much as I do. So that's a legit career. Even if he wants to do a podcast on Minecraft, all of the work that goes into making that podcast is going to be the exact same as the dietitian who wants to do short videos on healthy cooking. You're only swapping out topic matter. The being able to film it and edit it and do the audio video editing and the creativity of that stuff is all the same. You're just switching topics.
That's
So
really
finding
helpful.
videos, there is a certain amount of luck, but it's also navigating, participating in communities like this. If I know somebody who's great at math and I can't find anybody to do it, Barry's getting a phone call. Uh, so it is really kind of networking yourself, and then being able to have those opportunities, or participating in groups that are popping up, like the one that you have here, and other groups, to be able to be like, hey, I'm looking for somebody that has these skills and abilities. Does anybody know how to do this? And most of the time they're super interested, especially when the kids are performing a talent at a high level.
Right.
Because of their field, they're like, whoa, how is this 8-year-old doing this whatever. And they're like, this is amazing that he was able to figure this out on their own. And they can give a couple of tips and just be kind of on call. When we get stuck, can we call you and see how to move forward here? Because we're known, it's a little bit easier for me to get a hold of people when I'm looking for somebody, and I can be like, it's not just me as a thing. I can kind of be like, I'm Bryan from Trevor Studios, and this is what we're doing. That gives you a little bit more than maybe just calling out of the blue and not having any connection. So your local autism society, those communities that bridge out across internationally sometimes are good avenues to try to find those people.
Last question here. If you could plant one idea in the minds of educators, parents, or clinicians, something that's guided your work, what would it be? That one idea.
There's something really to be said to focusing on strengths. I know that seems kind of cliche even within here, but if you look at the deficit and go, this is something the brain can't do, right? Otherwise they wouldn't have the neurotype that they have. It doesn't matter how much time you spend on that, the brain can't do it. But what you see when you focus on strengths is that those deficits disappear on their own. And I think that's hard for people to rationalize, like, how do I get better at math by focusing on the thing that I want to do? But our passions drive our cognitive ability. Everything that we learn and how to adapt and how to reframe and how to do those things come to us naturally, typically within our passion. And that's how our cognition develops. So focusing on your passion, if a kid doesn't have the cognitive ability to do the thing that you don't want to do, but all you do is focus on the thing that they can't do, their cognitive ability doesn't progress at all. So focusing on those passions is what will drive their cognitive ability. And then at some point, what you see is all of a sudden they can just do that thing that they couldn't do previously, because their cognitive ability developed within their strength-based talent. So that's my message. Do what you love. You love
Do what you love.
Reason.
I want to thank you. We want to thank you so much for taking the time. You're so generous with your time today, with your stories and your insights. It's really been illuminating for us. And I think it's going to help a lot of parents and teachers out there too, sharing your experiences and perspectives.
I appreciate it. It was great fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Bryan. You're the best.
That's our conversation with Bryan Mishler. We hope you enjoyed hearing about the incredible work happening at the Treffert Studio and how a strength-based, adaptive approach can transform not just learning, but lives. For us at Spiral We Radio, this is exactly what our research and our work are all about: seeing each learner for who they are, meeting them where they are, and building from their strengths outward. Bryan's stories are a reminder that when we focus on connection and possibility, amazing things happen. We thank Bryan for sharing his time, his insights, and his passion for supporting autistic and twice exceptional learners. If you found this conversation valuable, please share it with other parents, educators, or anyone who cares about neurodiverse people. You can also subscribe to Spiral We Radio so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.